WHGE 95.3 FM. Coming up, the Open Eye.
Those of us that indulge or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of masturbation or egotism. We do so because it changes
to the show.
People's minds.
Peace and Black Power, brother. Same to you. Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs, your third eye optometrist and host. A little tongue-tied this morning. And I start running my mouth earlier. All right. And as I always tell you, every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. Yes, indeed. Let me get my disclaimer out the way right quick. All right. Take care of that. Yeah, right there it is.
The views and opinions expressed on Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM, nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual.
Yes, indeed. WHGE 95.3 FM. All right. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's what the Open Eye is about. Helping you learn, unlearn, and relearn. Yes, indeed. And I got this from Brother Steve Williams. Tell you how things work. I told my son, you will marry the girl I choose. He said, no. I told him, the girl I want you to marry is Bill Gates' daughter. Oh, he said, okay. I called Bill Gates and said, I want your daughter to marry my son. Bill Gates said, no. I told Bill Gates, my son is the CEO of World Bank. Bill Gates said, oh, okay. I called the president of World Bank and asked him to make my son the CEO. He said, no. I told him my son is Bill Gates' son-in-law. He said, okay. And that's how politics works. That's how politics works right here. All right. You know, it's something, I was listening to this sister this morning. Might be why I got in here a little late. But one of the things she was talking about is something, well, she quoted Muhammad Ali and quite a few others. Muhammad Ali said, we don't want nothing from you. Just leave us alone. Of course, it makes me think of James Brown. James Brown said, I don't want you to give me nothing to open up the door. I'll get it myself. And that's what integration was really about. It was about opening the door. We'll get it ourselves. Just open the door. And leave us alone. But they couldn't do that. Because when we were left to our own devices, well, prime example, and we all heard Black Wall Street. Did you heard of the man who purchased 40 acres of land and created Black Wall Street? You might have heard of Black Wall Street, but let's meet the founder, O.W. Gurley. In 1905, Gurley and his wife sold their property in Noble County and moved 80 miles to the oil boom town of Tulsa. Gurley purchased 40 acres of land in North Tulsa and established his first business, a rooming house, on a dusty road that would become Greenwood Avenue. He subdivided his plot into residential and commercial lots and eventually opened a grocery store. As the community grew around him, Gurley prospered. Between 1910 and 1920, the black population in the area he had purchased grew from 2,000 to nearly 9,000 in a city with a total population of 72,000. The black community had a large working class population, as well as doctors, lawyers, and other professionals who provided services to them. Soon the Greenwood section was dubbed Negro Wall Street by Tuskegee educator Booker T. Washington. Greenwood, now called Black Wall Street, was nearly self-sufficient with black-owned businesses, many initially financed by Gurley, ranging from brickyards and theaters to a chartered airplane company. Gurley built the Gurley Hotel at 112 North Greenwood and rented out spaces to smaller businesses. His other properties included a 2-story building at 119 North Greenwood, which housed the Masonic Lodge and a black employment agency. He was also one of the founders of the Vernon AME Church. And those of us that know the history know that black success is what spurred the white supremacists in Tulsa to destroy the black community. It makes me think of what the old folks said about black success. Ain't nothing a cracker with a penny hate more than a black man with a nickel. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. All right. With what's going on now with the election coming up, with some of the things that you've been hearing, let me start here with this. All right. If we are to have another contest in the near future of our national existence, I predict that the dividing line will not be Masons and Dixons, but between patriotism and intelligence on one side, and superstition, ambition, and ignorance on the other. That's a quote from Ulysses S. Grant. And considering the Trump cult being on the other side, like you said, it won't be the dividing line between Mason and Dixons, but between patriotism and intelligence. Now, the opposite of patriotism is nationalism. I'll tell you the difference. A nationalist is proud of his country no matter what it does. A patriot is proud of his country in spite of what it does, with the intention of making it better. It's the difference. Yeah, I saw notorious Negro peeing bed wench Candace Owens, one of the dumbest people on the public stage, say that, well, science is an intellectual cult. A cult? Science is, no. Science is the study of a subject to research and find out the roots of that subject. Of course, that's not Webster's definition, but it'll do for now. Brother Allen, I see you. Steve, what's up? All right. You know, it's something I see, and it still goes, that a lot of school children have a hard time sitting still. I know I did. Dick Gregory broke that down for us. He says school is a violation of the human spirit. You are not meant to sit in a box and be quiet and be still, and children know that. So they move. And that's a violation to do in school. All of us right now, we can leave here and walk to California. I don't care what medicine you're on. I don't care what kind of condition you're in. The secret is you have to do it at your own pace. The problem is we do it at somebody else's pace. You might be able to run or walk an average of 500 miles a day. I might just do 2 miles a day. The important thing is that we get there. See, that's why rich people would never send their children to public school. They have private schools where they do it at their own pace. So, Vaughn, this is the game they play. That's why they had recess, or the whole thing would blow up. Yeah, I remember when I was in elementary school, probably about the 4th grade. No, not probably about it. It was the 4th grade. We had a teacher named Paul Loper who had went to Britain and studied education. And what he came back with was the idea of open classrooms. And what that basically meant was teaching children at their own pace. Not only teaching children at their own pace, but limiting the number of children in a classroom. Because you go to most public schools, especially in the black community, you have 30 or 40 students in the class. And that's too many to keep an eye on. That's too many to teach. Most of the schools are overcrowded in poorer communities. And not only that, but you're taught to conform, and you're not taught to think. You're taught to remember. You're taught to take tests. Y'all remember before the internet that people thought the cause of stupidity was the lack of access to information? Yeah, that wasn't it. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Hey, I see your brother, boy. Mm-hmm. Patrice Gibbs, third eye optometrist. You're enjoying the Open Eye. Got this from Sister Tracy Johnson. In this house, we believe the American dream is a scam. Yeah. Policing originates from runaway slave patrols. Capitalism exploits. Colonialism is evil. The founding fathers were racist. 71% of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were slaveholders. Okay? Not only were they slaveholders, but what was the underlying issue of the Declaration of Independence? And now it wasn't written in the Declaration of Independence. And of course, what we were taught is that it was taxation without representation that spurred the founding fathers. And that may have been part of it. But another issue was for the British mother country had every intention of abolishing and outlawing slavery. And the colonialists on the stolen land in North America had no intention of adhering to that. The founding fathers were racist. American imperialism must end because America was built on genocide and slavery. We're on stolen indigenous land. Went on with another quote from Sister Tracy. And this one was actually a couple of years old, so it came up in my memories. It's even bigger than what we see on the surface. Pay attention, it's escalating. More will be rolled back. More will be overturned. More doors closed. As some of us already know, slavery never ended. It evolved. It was reimagined. The prison industry economy equals forced labor, plantation labor. Capitalism equals forced debt and indentured servitude. The system of oppression is currently, right now, being further modified. As long as our survival is dependent on a system and people whose desire is for our demise, we will never be free until we are self-sufficient and no longer dependent on how another people is willing to treat us and not dependent on their political whims. We will never be free. You see, when the Supreme Court basically abolished affirmative action, okay, you had some powerful black people that were either fired or stepped down because they were in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. Disney's chief diversity officer, Latondra Newton, stepped down. Warner Brothers Discovery lays off diversity exec Karen Horn. She was fired, kicked out. Get the hell out of here. We don't need that diversity crap no more. Yeah. Netflix first head of inclusion, Verna Myers, stepped down after 5 years. Film Academy's executive vice president of impact and inclusion, Janelle English, she exited the organization, stepped down. She's going to get fired anyway. When they don't have to include us, they won't. That's real talk. And they don't have to include us. They have no intention of doing so. But yet, they don't want us to do anything for ourselves on our own. Because like I said, the elders teach us the last thing in the world, the worst thing in the world, to a white man with a penny is a black man with a nickel. That's real talk. Now, until now, your income that paid for public schools by way of state and local taxes wasn't taxed by the federal government. When Trump was in office, the GOP ended that. Instead, what they did was they created a tax break for private school tuition. The GOP is in effect defunding public schools to fund private schools. And of course, this is just a straight up war on public education. And of course, if he gets back in, under the 2025 plan, what they're going to do is, one of the first things they're going to do is shut down the Department of Education. This is another front in the class warfare. Soon, lower income and working class people won't be able to afford a basic education. Public education has been degraded so badly, especially for black students. You had districts with 100% dropout rates. They call them the dropout rates, push out rates. You had teachers with little to no resources for class unless they pay for them out of their own meager shrinking pay. And you know that since 2020, more and more teachers are resigning or leaving the profession. Of course, with no education or job skills, low-income whites and blacks are condemned to abject poverty. Yeah, Project 2025, Jordan. They're condemned to abject poverty, which leads to crime, which leads to violence and incarceration, which means more people enslaved in the prison industrial plantation. Hey, notice I said plantation. Because you're taught in school slavery ended after the Civil War. And it did for about 10 years. Quoting Noam Chomsky. And by 1877, there was a compact made between the North and South that the South could do whatever it felt. So essentially, they reinstituted slavery, but in a much more brutal form. How could it be more brutal than what was on the plantation? Well, what they did is criminalize black life. So if a black man is standing on a corner, he can be arrested for vagrancy. If he looks at a white woman, he can be arrested for attempted rape, you know. Or whatever, it didn't matter. You know you were in for a $10 fee. You never get out because you couldn't pay the corrupt judge. You couldn't pay the lawyer. You know, you didn't have any money anyway. So essentially, you were forced into permanent servitude. And the thing is, these criminalized black people were then handed over to the industry. And that's a large part of the American industrial development. This big Southern industrialization based on mines, you know, U.S. Steel and so on, or just basically agriculture, of course. They went right back to the cotton fields. And this is a large part of American industry economic history. Oh, it was worse than slavery for exactly these reasons. The slave owners always argue, you know, when we own these people, we had to take care of them. Now that the state owns them, we just pick them up from the jails. We don't give a damn about them. They die of starvation, so what? We just go back to the jail and get some more. So you had a period that actually was worse than slavery, and it went up to the Second World War. And this was no small impact on American industrial history. And it brings me to this. Excuse me. During the presidential debate a little over a week ago, the clown show, I did not watch it. Okay? One of the things that came out of that is Trump talking about black jobs. What's a black job? What the word of the day is discernment, which is the ability to judge well. Okay? It was a true test of the public's discerning fact from fiction. Whether the masses can see through former President Donald Trump's bravado and his cascade of lies. Whether they could hear the whisper of democratic principles, potentially the last ever from a sitting president, in Joe Biden's raspy voice. And the disorienting. That's what came to mind when Trump made the racist comment about immigrants purportedly taking black jobs, which came in response to a question about some black voters feeling left behind. Here's the exact quote. The fact is that his big bill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now. They're taking black jobs. And you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be worse in our history. See, what this is Trump's attempt to turn black people against immigrants and, to put a schism between immigrants and black people. They didn't need Trump to do that. They do that them damn selves. A lot of them. Okay? But what is a black job? I need to know. Because do I have a black job? And does the white version of my job pay more? Have more benefits? What is a black job? Let me clear it up for you. A black job in the mind of people like Trump and his followers, and a lot of white people in general, Republican or Democrat, is a job that white people are comfortable with you having. A black job is a job that doesn't make white people feel that you're a threat to them in that position. A black job is a job that gives a black person no authority over other white employees. Often that falls into low-wage jobs and what have you. A black job is a job that doesn't make white America feel threatened. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM, I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. What is it, this week, just recently? Some of the things that have, that have come out of the Supreme Court have actually been frightening. Been real crazy. Last week I talked about the Supreme Court making it okay for states to outlaw homelessness. Now what's that do? That takes us right back to the vagrancy laws that were after Reconstruction. You could be arrested for not having a home. Vagrancy laws. You can be arrested for not having anywhere to go, even if the shelters are full. Homelessness in America is a fact of life. I remember before the 80s, we didn't even have it wasn't even part of our lexicon, homelessness, even though it existed, but nothing on the level that it does now. And usually there was a particular place where you saw homeless people, and usually it was mostly men. It's called Skid Row, and there's Skid Row in cities throughout the country where poor, destitute men gathered and trying to make it through the day. Skid Row. And then along came Ronald Reagan, the Republican deity. May he roast in hell, may the devil sodomize him with a pitchfork. Because one of the first things he did was to stop the funding for mental health facilities, and these people were turned out in the street en masse. Okay? And this was where you started seeing more people homeless. And then another thing, during the 70s, by the 70s, wages actually were outpacing inflation. The Republican demon, Ronald Reagan, may he roast to hell, may the devil sodomize him with a pitchfork, and his corporate cronies, and we got to put a stop to this. Jobs were plentiful. You could walk off a job Monday and be employed by Wednesday. That's up until Ronald Reagan. And then they came with this trickle-down economics. Ain't nothing trickle down but piss. Okay? And then the inflation. You see, people were too comfortable. I mean, they wouldn't take crap off of employers. And then came these Reaganomics. Wages stagnated. And people became afraid to complain because they were afraid of losing their employment. And that was the plan. Even now, I seen one of these corporatists get on and say, people are too damn comfortable. You need to cut some of these wages and make them uncomfortable so they don't stand up for themselves when they're being dogged out by these capitalists. Yes, indeed, Brother Jardea, the airline industry. That was once looked at as glamorous. You're a pilot. You probably made a lot of money. Yeah. And you're well, then they were called stewardess, and flight attendants now. The airline industry has become so draconian. Most people hate to fly. You got to deal with the racism. American Airlines being one of the most racist airlines in the industry. Just recently, they're facing a lawsuit for kicking 3 or 4 black men off the plane because somebody allegedly complained about their body odor. And that's very interesting, coming from palm-colored people who have a history of not bathing. I see them on videos now saying, "Oh, well, no, if I do bathe, I don't use a washcloth. That's for poor people. And you don't need to bathe 2 or 3 times a week." I saw a palm-colored woman talking about her infant. And she only bathed them when the infant seemed to complain about not being bathed. The infant can't talk. How the hell he know to complain about not being bathed? But y'all kicked them off the plane, allegedly for body odor. Now you're being sued. Now you kicked them off the plane because they were black. Cut the crap. Now, the Supreme Court has come up with this immunity for the president. I was joking with Brother Vaughn yesterday and said, well, maybe, since they made that decision, maybe what Biden needs to do is to bust a move. So he doesn't have an opponent in the next presidential election. Okay? King Joe. Yeah, that could be dangerous for us. Yeah. Yeah, the Supreme Court, which is probably one of the most corrupt Supreme Courts to sit in office in the history of America. They're going rogue, power grab. Yeah. So it's this immunity that they've given the president. Is an unusual in an unusual move. Justice Sonia Sotomayor not only wrote the dissent speaking for Justices Kagan and Brown Jackson, but read it from the bench to underscore the extraordinary judicial failure by the majority. This is what she said. Justice Sotomayor, her dissent. She said, "I am deeply troubled by the ideal inherent in the majority's opinion that our nation loses something valuable when the president is forced to operate within the confines of federal criminal law." The public interest in the federal criminal prosecution of a former president alleged to have used the powers of his office to commit crimes may be greater still. The president represents all the voters in the nation, and his powers are given by the people under our Constitution. When presidents use the powers of their office for personal gain or as part of a criminal scheme, every person in the country has an interest in that criminal prosecution. Yet the majority believes that a president's anxiety over prosecution overrides the public's interest in accountability and negates the interests of the other branches in carrying out their constitutionally assigned functions. Imagine the president states in an official speech that he intends to stop a political rival from passing legislation that he opposes, no matter what it takes to do so. It's an official act. He then hires a private hitman to murder that political rival, an unofficial act. Under the majority's rule, the murder indictment could include no allegation of the president's public admission of premeditated intent to support the means era of murder. The long-term consequences of today's decision are stark. The court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune, immune, immune. With fear for our democracy, I the same. And let me tell you something. You remember when they were having Black Lives Matter protests, okay? He sent out the National Guard and basically tried to outlaw the protests. Now the president, with immunity, can send government hitmen after the leaders of protests and be open about it. Yeah, we know that's nothing new. We know it's nothing new for the government to murder those that speak truth to power. Dr. King, Fred Hampton. We know it's nothing new. But now they're going to be open about it, in your face with it. The president with immunity send out people to murder and oppress openly with immunity. Damn. WHGE 95.3 FM. Let me tell you this here. Okay. Like I said, nothing new. What's up, Sister Nzinga? How has this been dealt with in the past? Well, in 1649, King Charles was tried for treason and other high crimes. The monarch responded with the maxim, the king can do no wrong, and therefore he cannot be tried or convicted. That's basically what the Supreme Court just now did with the president. The president is now king, and he cannot be tried or convicted. Now, you know what? I'll tell you what happened to, and yes, and Brother Malcolm X. So when King Charles said this, he was beheaded 10 days later. I told you a couple of times, George Carlin said, beware of stupid people in large numbers. Choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought, because to be led by a coward is to be controlled by all that coward fears. To be led by a fool is to be led by the opportunists who control the fool. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. To be led by a liar is to ask to be told lies. And to be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery. Yes, indeed. WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye. Yes, B, Sister Nzinga, is some deep shit. I'm off the air. Took a little music break here. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM, the education advocacy station. And that's what you get right here on The Open Eye with Patrice Gibbs. The early white Christians didn't convert Africans into Christianity to save their souls. This is an irrefutable fact because they believed that Africans had no souls and that heaven was for whites only. And teach you to get your heaven and pie in the sky while they have their heaven right here. The true self-serving reason was to ingrain the myth of a white God into their minds. This made the Africans more subservient towards whites, therefore into better slaves. And you know, it's amazing because I've seen it. Okay, I've seen it. But before I get into that, something Brother Judea said, and what good are the Democrats? Congressional black coons are good for what? Yeah, because we don't hear anything from the Congressional Black Caucus like we should. Because remember, the Congressional Black Caucus is a fundraising apparatus. It is not an entity to speak truth to power. And when you do have those blacks that get into Congress and do speak truth to power, they're ostracized. My sister, I think she's from Ohio, State Senator Nina Turner. When she ran against the Democratic machine's choice, a Negro peeing bedwench, who was her opponent. What's his name? Clyburn from South Carolina. He came up to Ohio to support the Negro peeing bedwench. Yeah. Remember, this is the same fool that was out there talking about, y'all need to stop this slogan there and talking about defund the police. And what reparations? We don't need no reparation. Speak truth to power. But black people will get more emotional over the thought of Jesus dying on the cross than their ancestors hanging from a tree. A black man with a PhD in history said he's a born-again Christian. I rest my case. WHGE 95.3 FM. If your slave master was not a Christian or a Muslim, what would you be? How could you be a historian and not know the nefarious history of our people and religion? You know, people still believe that Ramses II was a villain and a failed ruler as depicted in the Bible and on the movies, The Ten Commandments. They still believe that. And nothing could be further from the truth. Let's take a look at Ramses. I have before. Known as Ramses the Great and reverently referred to as the Great Ancestor, Ramses was the third pharaoh of the 19th dynasty of Egypt. He is often regarded as the greatest, most celebrated, most powerful pharaoh of the New Kingdom, itself the most powerful period of ancient history. Ramses the Great. He is without a doubt the most important figure in the history of ancient Egypt. And when you consider that the list of pharaohs includes some of the greatest names in history, it says a lot to place Ramses at the top of the list. Pharaoh Seti named Ramses II his firstborn Prince Regent, meaning heir to the throne, when he is only 14 years old. And let me tell you something, there was never any competition for the throne or his father's affection from some fictional character, like depicted in the movie The Ten Commandments. That fictional character being Moses. As a matter of fact, due to his father's intense training and love for his son, Ramses was a military commander at 16. That's some serious training. Under Seti's tutelage, he gained the skills and character to sit on the throne while he was still a teenager. And Ramses sat on the throne at 25 years old and ruled until his death at 91. He ruled 66 years, the longest ruling pharaoh in the history of Egypt. That is not a failed ruler. He expanded the empire, built temples, monuments, and cities. Excuse me. And his architectures were so skilled that he could point out a swath of land and say, you know what? Yeah, I like that land over there. I like the way it relates to the Nile. Go over there and build a city. And within 20 years, a city would be standing and functioning. That is not a failed ruler as you are taught and as depicted in the Bible and in the movie The Ten Commandments. But even now, we have Christian groups. We have who are they? The Hebrew Israelites that vilify Egypt. Egypt was a slave state. No, it wasn't. Those slaves built the pyramids. The pyramids were built by skilled craftsmen. The monuments that Ramses ordered up were built by skilled craftsmen who were well paid. And part of their motivation was their patriotism. WHGE 95.3 FM, The Open Eye. Read a book. Hey, thank you, sister. Obviously, I enjoy what I do because time flies when you're having a good time, huh? Yeah. Coming around to the close of the show, actually. All right. Having been enslaved for 250 years, black people were not left to their own devices. Because if we had been left alone, with all the examples, Black Wall Street, Rosewood, North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, with all the examples shown, we would have far outpaced any other group. You think about what happened after slavery and when Reconstruction was in place. You know, it was only 10 or 12 years. And within those 10 or 12 years, during Reconstruction, we built up communities that can compete with anybody. Not only compete, but outpace. We built up we built up communities. It's just within 10 years after slavery. We built up communities that included all the things that go into place for a successful society. Schools, hospitals, businesses, the church. Yes, and I know I'm critical of the black church. But then the black church had a liberation theology. It was an instrument of our freedom and support of each other. 10 years. We built up communities that were so thriving that the white community felt definitely threatened. No, black people were not left to their own devices. They were terrorized. In the Deep South, a second slavery ruled. In the North, legislatures, mayors, civic associations, banks, and citizens all colluded to pin black people in the ghettos where they were overcrowded, overcharged, and undereducated. Businesses discriminated against black people, awarding them the worst jobs and the worst wages. Police brutalized them in the streets, and the notion that black lives, black bodies, and black wealth were rightful targets remains deeply rooted in the broader society. Now we have half stepped away from our long centuries of despoilment, promising never again. But still, we are haunted. It's as though we have run up a credit card bill, having pledged to charge you no more, remain befuddled that the balance does not disappear. The effects of that balance, interest accruing daily, are all around us. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. This is Patrice Gibbs, your third eye optometrist. You know, I've been holding this for a minute, Brother Jardea. Okay. And I want to ask, where are my warriors? Let me just give you a couple from the warriors' rules to live and work by. As an African nationalist, fighting to maintain my and my people's lives and sanity in this anti-African reality, I affirm the following. I will not be contradictory. What I think will be exactly what I say, and what I say will be exactly what I do. I will uncompromisingly be who I think and say I am. You know what? I'm going to leave it there. And I come back on the Open Eye, we're going to go over this in depth. And that first line, let me go over that again. I will not be contradictory. What I think will be exactly what I say, and what I say will be exactly what I do. I will uncompromisingly be who I think and say I am. I'm Patrice Gibbs. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. Thank you for joining me on The Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. All right. And thanks for joining me, y'all. That's word. And as I always tell you, gas, global African supremacy. Because the world was a much better place when the African ruled. I'm Patrice Gibbs.